Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Noble Company podcast. This is our first episode for 2024. And for those of you who are not familiar with our podcast, we normally look at business topics, contemporary business topics, with experts, academics, and business persons from across the world. So this episode, we're really focusing on how to navigate fear. Now, fear is something that most of us experience. I dare say all of us experience at some point in time. But our ability to manage the fear and navigate it makes a big difference between whether we are successful or whether we're regretful, where we end up in life. And I'm pretty sure that there's so much inside of us that we want to accomplish, that we want to get out. But many of us have a lot of fears that are holding us back. And I actually did a poll last week, which looked at where some of the biggest areas of fear came from. And it seems like the majority of persons had fear of failure. Some had fear of rejection. And then a lot of people also had fear of inadequacy. And so when I thought about what I wanted to tackle for the first thing for the year, I know that a lot of us are in planning mode in January, and a lot of us, there's so many things that we put together, and we have our New Year's resolutions, and we are like, okay, this is what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do, but then we never get past the plans. And so I thought that Makeda would be the perfect person to come and speak with us today to help us to figure out where this fear is coming from and how we can overcome it. So let me introduce Makeda. Hi, Makeda.
Hi, Roanne. Hi, everyone.
So Makeda is actually no stranger to this podcast. She's been on before. She was here when we talked about career pivoting, and people were absolutely blown away with Makeda. And so I wanted to bring her back so that she could share with us. And I'm actually going to let Makeda say a little bit about herself. So Makeda?
Over to me.
Yes.
Well, I'm Makeda Alleyne. It's great to see everyone. No, they can't see you, but to talk to everyone today. I am a speaker, a trainer, as well as a coach, and I work with individuals as well as organizations. And essentially, the work that I do is to help individuals get the very best out of themselves. And I say that as a result of working with me, the main results that our individuals see are being able to take action in the face of their biggest fears, skyrocketing their belief in themselves and what they're capable of and what they deserve, and really stepping into and unleashing their full power, potential, and possibility. So that really is the work that I do. And it's all around building confidence, owning your brilliance, and overcoming fear.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And so I think the first thing that I want to find out from you is, how would you define fear?
That is a great question. I start by saying that fear is very complex. It's a complex and pretty much fundamental emotion that raises its head when there is perceived pain, threat, or danger. So I always say the feelings associated with fear, it's very, very real. I've heard this acronym before, saying that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And I think that's really misleading because there's nothing false about it. The feeling of fear is extremely real and very strong. And it can be the difference between you having one type of life and the life that you actually dream of. In talking about fear, if I could share a little bit more, Ryan,
Sure.
I always say that there are 3 things that you should know about fear. So the first thing that you should know is that as long as you're breathing, as long as you're living, as long as you're stretching yourself, as long as you're venturing outside of your comfort zone and doing new things, you are going to experience fear, plain and simple. Because new, uncomfortable, and unfamiliar things are scary. So as long as you're growing, you are going to experience fear. So that's the first thing. And linked to that is that you said it in your introduction, Ryan. Everyone experiences fear. So if you face a fear, don't feel that it's something, that just you or just a certain type of people experience. everyone experiences fear. I remember one time, one time I was on a call with a client and we were talking about her desires and goals from us working together. And she said, Makeda, I want to be fearless like you. And I said, fearless like who? Fearless like who, Ryan? Because I am definitely not fearless. And actually, that's one of the things that really, really irks me when people use the term fearless, because everyone experiences fear. And when people talk about fearless leadership or I can help you to become fearless, I think it's absolute nonsense. And it sets the standard that we try to attain, that we can try to attain. And then when we fall short, then we can beat ourselves up. So everyone experiences fear. And I don't believe in being fearless, but I do believe that you can fear less. If you get that important distinction, I don't believe in being
Yeah.
fearless, but I do
Yes.
believe that you can fear less. And when I always say, like, when you fear less, then you don't do things like procrastinate and being stuck in inaction. When you fear less, you also trust yourself to go outside of your comfort zone. And when you fear less, you also are more willing to put yourself out there for new opportunities. So that's the second thing. Everyone experiences fear. There's no such thing as being fearless. And the final thing that I think you should know about fear is that action is the antidote to fear.
Mhm.
Action is the antidote to fear. You can't plan your way through fear. You can't think your way through fear. You can't prepare your way through fear. Action is the antidote to fear. The only way to overcome a fear is to take action on the very thing that scares you. Because that's how you prove to yourself that you can handle everything. That's how you prove to yourself that you're not going to fall apart. And once you take action, then also what happens is that's when you start to build confidence. So confidence comes as a result of the action. One of my favorite quotes is by Linda Fields, and she says, confidence is a gift you receive after you've done the scary thing. So action is the antidote to fear. So those are three things I really wanted to share with you and the audience today. As long as you are growing, you're going to experience fear. Everyone experiences fear, and action is the antidote to fear.
Mhm. And it's really funny that you mentioned that about people calling you fearless, because I think people
Mm-hmm.
think the same thing about me. So
Mm-hmm.
even I remember when I started to get really active on LinkedIn and, doing my posts and my podcast. And I was talking to a friend and she said, and I said, you think that I like doing this? Right? Like, this, right. This is so scary for me. And she was
Mm-hmm.
like, really? I was like, yeah. And she was so shocked. But the thing is, for me, I made a commitment to not be governed by fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, yes, there are times I don't want to put myself out there, but I know the importance of putting
Mm-hmm.
myself out there. I know the importance of being visible. And
Mm-hmm.
as an entrepreneur, I mean, you just have to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not about being fearless, it's about saying to yourself, the bravery comes from saying, okay, in spite of this fear, instead of what I'm feeling, I'm going to do this.
Still take
Um,
action.
and the very interesting thing, I really want us to get into talking about managing fear from a very healthy point of view, because I also remember when I was a lot younger, when I had fear, I would often
Mm-hmm.
do anything to get rid of the fear. So whether it was something positive or negative, because I heard you talk about action, taking action,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't necessarily take the best action. I just didn't like the
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, and I'm like, I have to get rid of this. And so I did something about it. So, what do you think is a healthy way to approach? Well, you said taking action, but can you talk about healthy ways to take action?
Mm. Firstly, I want to say when you were talking about your work on LinkedIn, what it sounded like to me is that your tolerance for fear increased. So that instead of it shutting you down, you think, actually, I don't want to post on LinkedIn, period. You were
Yeah.
able to work through the fear and your tolerance for fear. Because if your tolerance for fear is low, then that's when you
Mhm.
start doing things like procrastinating and falling
Mhm.
into inaction. But if your tolerance for fear, if you can raise that, then you can start working through the fear as well.
Yes, that is
Yeah.
absolutely correct.
And of course, I forgot your question, Ron.
Oh, okay. We can come back to that later as well. Before we get into that, let's talk about what are the common roots of fear, because so many times we live with
Mm.
fear, but we don't know where it is coming from. So, can you tell me, when you work with your clients, what are they usually telling you, or what do you help them to discover about where their fear emanates? And also, what are the most common ways, or what's the most common root rather of fear?
That's a great question. I think that because fear is so complex, there isn't one primary kind of root, or I wouldn't necessarily say that there's kind of like the most common root
Mm,
or cause of fear. But some of the things that I've seen is that fear can result from previous experiences. For
mm,
example, childhood experiences. It can
yes.
come from trauma. It can come from learned behavior. It can come from cultural norms. And it can
Mhm,
even come from beliefs that you hold about yourself or the world around you. If I
mhm,
give you an example from a client, I'm going to give examples is all with permission, and I'll keep it
mhm.
anonymous as well, obviously.
Sure.
Um, so she came to me, she had a fear of success. That was her fear, and we didn't know where it was coming from. So when we got to the root of it, we realized that her mother had been very successful, and her mother passed
Mhm,
away when she was really young. So because of that, she had this belief that success equals to bad things happening to you or bad things happening to loved ones. So she
oh,
developed a fear of success that was holding her back from starting her own business. So that's an example of how beliefs can actually be the root cause of fear. So I say those things that I mentioned, previous experiences, childhood experiences, trauma, learned behavior, beliefs, cultural norms can be some of the main causes of fear or root causes of fear.
mhm. And so I guess now we kind of get to the question that I was asking before. So let me frame it
Mm,
differently. How do we begin to address our feelings of fear, and what are some effective strategies? Because what I was saying is that I think previously, like when I was younger, I did whatever it took to get rid of the fear. I was just like, you know,
mm,
whatever came to my mind to do to get that feeling out of my stomach at the time, the butterflies,
mm.
I'm just going to do it. Now I think that I'm more strategic. But can you share what are some of the effective strategies that we can take to address our fears?
Mm. I'm actually thinking about when you were saying about distraction, was it kind of like distraction techniques? Is that what you're speaking to that you used to do?
What do you call it? Distraction? Yeah, maybe it was distraction. I think in some
Mm.
cases it was distraction. In some cases it was just impulse decisions,
Okay, okay, I'm with
right?
you. Yeah.
Um, because I just wanted to take action so that I could just move forward. But then sometimes I realize after the fact, okay, this was not the best decision. Of course, you make a decision, you have to roll with it and,
Mm,
make the best of life. But um, as I got older, I realized that there were better ways to handle that feeling inside, other than, being rash or being distracted by something else. So, what are some of your strategies for addressing fear effectively?
So I'd say to begin to address fear, to do it effectively, I think a lot of the time when we think about fear as this kind of like, I almost describe it as like a monster, like a Hulk-like monster, this thing that we need to fight and overcome. And we almost see it as if it's like an enemy that we need to fight against. So one of the ways that you can start addressing the feelings of fear is to transform your relationship with fear.
Mhm.
So I speak about with my clients going from what if instead of viewing fear as your foe, you view it as your friend? What
Yes.
could that look like? And that could sound a bit of a stretch, like, what do you mean by make fear my friend? But when you make fear your friend, instead of having to fight against it, what happens is you can get curious. You can get curious as you would with a friend and start to explore what is fear there to teach me? Because fear is always there to teach you something. So if you look at fear as your friend, then you can start to get curious about why it is showing up, and maybe it's showing up repeatedly, maybe it's showing up in the same situations. If you think about what it's there to teach you, for example, you might have a fear of failure, and maybe that fear of failure is showing up. Maybe it's there to teach you that you need to change your reframe what you think failure actually means to you. Or it could be there to teach you that you need to plan a little bit more, prepare a little
Mhm.
bit more. So fear is always there to teach you something. I say if when you transform your relationship with fear from foe to friend, you can also invite it along on your journey with you. So rather than waiting to fear for fear to disappear, like you were talking about with LinkedIn, you can actually invite it on the journey with you and actually get going. Now, when I
Yeah.
say invite on the journey, Ron, I say if you think about a car journey, now fear does not have to sit in the front seat. Fear doesn't have to sit in the front seat, control the radio stations, control the AC. Fear can sit in the back seat, you know? Fear can sit in the back, but it can still come on the journey with you rather than waiting for it to disappear. And also, when you start to view it as a friend, you can actually leverage fear to ignite the courage within you to go after what you want. If I use myself as an example, one of my, just to put my business out there, my biggest fear is that I won't live up to my potential.
Mhm.
So instead of that causing me to go into inaction, what it actually does is it motivates me to keep going, to keep pushing, to keep striving to achieve my goals. So you can actually leverage fear to ignite the courage within you once you are able to transform your relationship with fear and stop fighting against it and view it as a friend.
Mhm.
That makes sense?
That makes complete sense.
Mm.
Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. And I'm just going to go to the comments quickly.
Mhm.
So, Gail, thank you so much for being with us. Gail
Hi,
said,
Gail.
people say fake it until you make it, but I prefer to think we can be brave until we don't need to be brave anymore. Any
Mm.
thoughts on that, Makeda?
I do not believe in fake it till you make it. So I'm 100% with Gail. I don't think it benefits anyone. The energy that you put into faking it, you can put into improving yourself and overcoming your fears. Or if it's
Mhm.
confidence, you can use it to actually improve your confidence. So I don't believe in faking it till you make it. Till you make it.
Mhm.
So you said we can be brave until we don't have to be brave anymore. 100%. Or you might be brave and then I've heard people say new level, new devil, which I don't particularly like. But the idea is you could be brave in this comfort zone. And then when you step out of that comfort zone, it requires a new level of bravery in order to approach that one. So, no, I'm with you, Gail, 100%.
Okay. Valley, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. Valley says, hi, everyone. Loving what I hear so far. And she also says, my initial fear of success was rooted in a consuming fear of failing or insecurity. Thanks for sharing that vulnerability with us.
Mm.
Mhm. Anything to add, Makeda?
No, I say that people talk about fear of failure, and that's one of the, as you said from your poll, that's one of the very popular fears. But
Mhm.
fear of success is also extremely, extremely popular, and it can common, I should say, and it can hold you back in a number of ways. So if we go back to like the root causes, I've seen people, I gave the example of my client, but also people have a feeling, I've seen people with a feeling that success might mean certain things for their relationships. Maybe you might, outgrow your family or,
Mhm.
go farther than your mother. And then that kind of translates into fear of success. So fear of success is much more common than, people talk about.
Mhm. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And the thing is, you know, again, that need to, that visibility. I know there are some
Mm.
people that fear success because of the visibility that it brings. And remember, even from the poll, I put fear of criticism, and nobody actually selected fear of criticism.
Okay.
And I thought that was really interesting because I've met several people who like to play it safe, like to kind of be behind the
Mm.
scenes because they don't want people criticizing them. They don't want people saying, you know, they're getting too big for their boots, or they think that they're better than everybody else. And so the kind of attention, and sometimes negative attention, that can come with
Mm.
success, or that visibility, actually causes persons to kind of shrink at times.
100%.
And in that way, they don't get the opportunity to explore their full potential.
100%. You hit the nail right on the head, Ron.
Yeah. All right. And then Arlene says, from others as well, they project their fears.
That's a very good point, a very valid point, Arlene. One of the questions, and actually I can go through those questions with you if you would like, Cameron.
Sure.
Is your fear even yours, or is it coming from someone else? You know, we talked about previous experiences, childhood experiences. Have you just taken on a fear that your mother had, for example, and you've taken that on as your own, and now you're wearing that as your own coat? Or, you know, or is it actually your genuine fear? That's one of the things when you talk about getting curious of fear. That's one of the questions that I encourage people to ask.
And I think what's really interesting about that is, and I think we talked about it when we were on the podcast together with the Pivoting, is that I find myself doubting myself sometimes when persons project their fear on me, because I'm like, okay, am I not taking this seriously enough? Am I not taking everything into consideration? Because I'm, for the most part, a very courageous person. One, it's something that I guess I was born with, like socialization, but also practice, right? Like you said, practicing and, conquering the fears. But then sometimes people get into your ear and you're like, have I thought this through? Have I thought about every, thing that could come out of this? And, sometimes you really have to sit back and you have to realize, one, you have to be very aware of who you share your dreams with, because they are not called to the same thing that you are called to. So their fears about what you are going to be accomplished, or what you may encounter on your journey, actually is theirs, because that's not their calling. But you may feel a sense of courage or passion because it's yours. So it's very interesting. I'm really glad that you brought that up, Arlene. Projection of fears from people onto you. You have to be very careful that you don't do that. And Keisha says,
hi, Keisha.
So far. Thanks for joining, Keisha. All right. So we have...
I would love, Rowan, if I may,
sure,
to share some of these questions, because I actually jotted them down. I'm saying I don't want to forget these. So these are questions when I talked about transforming your relationship with fear, and I talked about getting curious. People often say, like, what do you mean getting curious with fear? So this is what it looks like to get curious. And I have 10 questions here, which if anyone is listening, they might want to jot them down. And the first one is, what am I actually afraid of? I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that I'm scared. But scared of what? Is it the failure? Is it criticism? Is it, embarrassment? Is it success? What is it that you're actually afraid of? And then curiosity also looks like asking, when have I felt this feeling before? When have I felt this feeling before? And how did I handle it then? How did I handle it then? And is there a different way to handle it now? So these are all questions that you can ask to start getting curious if you're fear. And the next one is, this is what Arlene, was it Arlene or Bio? Yeah, what the lady just said. Yes.
Darlene,
is this fear actually, right, okay. Is this fear actually mine, or have I taken on someone else's fear as my own? Another one, a question to consider is, am I afraid of the process or the outcome? There's a big difference there. Sometimes a lot of people might be afraid of the actual starting to do it and the process itself, as opposed to the outcome. So that's another point for curiosity. You talked about sitting with discomfort, Rowan. So am I willing to sit with discomfort of the fear and still do it? One of the things I always say is that uncomfortable doesn't mean unbearable. So are you willing to sit with the discomfort of the fear and still do it? And then another one is, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen? We always talk about worst case scenarios. Okay, so if you're scared of something and fearing an outcome or fearing a process, allow yourself to think, okay, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen here? And then how likely is it that it will actually happen? You might think about it, okay, the worst thing that could happen is I go up to present and I fall flat on my face, or I forget the words, or something like that. Okay, well, how likely is it that that's actually going to happen? And then lastly, if this does happen, what can I do to manage it? So
Yeah.
then you started to prepare, prepare yourself. Okay, if this actually is almost like putting like landing pillows in place so like the fall isn't as hard. So if this does happen, what can I do to manage it? So that's why it looks like to get curious with your fear. Start asking it questions, really seeing what it's there to teach you, really seeing what it's there to show you, because it's always there to teach you something.
And Makeda, I'm going to ask you to send me some of those questions so that I can share with the audience, if you don't mind.
No, of course. Mhm.
Okay. Going back to the comments quickly, I have Glenn. Thanks for signing on, Glenn. Glenn said, I've struggled with fear of criticism, but gladly overcame it. Very good.
Mhm.
And then Dan Raj. Welcome, Dan Raj.
Welcome.
Oops. Let me go back to Dan Raj. Dan Raj said, how is that related to anxiety? And I'm assuming that Dan Raj means fear. Correct me if I'm
Oh,
wrong, Dan Raj, but go ahead.
I'd say one of the manifestations of fear, if we're looking at physiological manifestations, would be anxiety. So that's the
Mhm.
link. That's the link to anxiety, Danraj. So if you experience fear, it can also present itself by feeling anxious. So
Mhm.
it's learning strategies then, not to just overcome the fear, but to move through the anxiety. And when you work on one, it tends to have a positive effect on the other as well.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. All right. So let me remove that from the screen. Guys, please bear with me and be patient. My tech guy had an emergency, and so I'm just here trying to fumble with the comments and stuff like that because I'm not really used to it. So thank you for your patience.
You're doing a great job, Rowan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So I think you started to talk about this a bit, but maybe we can flesh it out a little bit more. How can fear be used as a catalyst for personal growth and self discovery?
How can fear be used as a catalyst for personal growth and self-discovery? I think it relates to what I talked about in terms of being there to teach you something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it can also, well, it builds courage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the personal growth. It builds
Mm-hmm.
courage. Courage and bravery cannot exist without the presence of fear.
Mm-hmm.
So it builds courage, and it also builds confidence, because as you take steps to move through the fear, your confidence in yourself also increases. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
say as well, it helps you to discover your strengths, because as you work through the fear, very often you discover strengths about yourself. You discover strengths rather that you have to utilize in order to work through that fear. So it can actually help you to discover your strengths. So I say discover strengths, build courage, builds confidence, it also expands your comfort zone. So it
Yes.
also expands, what you're comfortable doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say if your comfort zone is like this, let me pull it down here. And you step outside of your comfort zone and you're there long enough, then you create a new comfort zone. So your comfort zone
Mm-hmm.
becomes bigger. And then as you go outside, you create a new comfort zone. So your comfort zone doesn't stay the same. So if you're tackling fear, that means that you're growing. So that means your comfort zone itself also expands.
Which means that your capacity to achieve greater things happens as well.
Exactly, exactly.
All right. So Keisha says, "Well, that's a gem right there. Courage and bravery can't exist in the absence of fear." I love that.
Mm.
Thank you, Keisha. Well, you know that Makeda is always dropping the gems, so that's her favorite thing to do. All right. And Arlene is agreeing. Arlene says, "So you grow as a result."
Yes, you
Yeah.
do. You have no choice but to grow, Arlene. You have no choice but to grow.
Yeah. And so even when we think about the fear and the I guess the resulting anxiety that comes from it, just like you said, allowing ourselves to put it in the back seat,
Mm-hmm.
kind of drive with it. When you think about just that analogy of driving, you're actually like getting to your destination. You're actually getting closer to your destination. You're not having it in the front seat, being a front seat driver telling you what to do
Mm-hmm.
and what's not. And so many people, get derailed, or they go off course because fear is taking them all over the place. You know, fear
Mm-hmm.
is causing all sorts of distractions. And so sometimes you just stop. You just stop. But what you need to do is to put fear in its place, which is behind you.
Which is behind you,
Yeah. And then
100%.
you actually have the opportunity to move forward. And I think that that's actually, you know, a very powerful way to look at it. If you're driving, at least you're moving, you know?
Yeah, you are moving. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's some people that never move. And that's what we're trying to, to accomplish here. We want people to be able to do it afraid. Yeah.
Do it afraid, 100%. Which is, I think you had asked me some effective strategies for
Mm-hmm.
overcoming fear. So I can share you that first one is the action itself.
Yeah.
So when it comes to action to overcome fear, as I said, action is the antidote to fear. I think if we're looking at strategies, one of the key things to remember, one of the pivotal things to remember is that you can set realistic goals. Action doesn't have to be huge action. It can
Mm-hmm.
be incremental action. So when you're looking at getting courage, you don't necessarily have to have courage to, get to the mountaintop. You just need enough courage to take the first step.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you've taken the first step, then you can't get enough courage to take the second step, and then the third step, and then the fourth step. So often we can fall into the trap of thinking, well, I need enough courage to do the big thing. But actually, you just need enough courage to take, one step. And then, of course, as we talked about, what happens? Confidence is the gift to receive after you've done the scary thing. So once you've
Mm-hmm.
taken that first step, your confidence in yourself and what you're able to handle and what you're able to do, that massively grows, and you can take that with you on your journey.
Mm-hmm. Um, how would you say fear normally manifests? I know you talked about inaction, you talked about procrastination. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that?
I say inaction, procrastination, delaying things, ruminating, overthinking.
I hate ruminating.
Yes, indecisiveness. Yeah, indecisiveness as well.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly seeking reassurance from other people as opposed to trusting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some of the key ones that I see in terms of how it actually manifests. But a
Mm-hmm.
very key one is just inaction. It's a
Mm-hmm.
massive staller.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you
All
can
right.
get stuck by things with indecisiveness for sure.
Yeah, because again, that helps you to get nowhere fast.
It helps you to get nowhere fast. Yes.
And
Yeah.
and I would have shared that procrastination is something that I deal with as well. It's something that I'm working on, but I think
Hmm.
sometimes again I because I've made a commitment to not let fear govern my life because I want to accomplish everything that I have to accomplish in this life, and I will not let
Hmm.
something like fear, stop me. But sometimes it does delay me, um, and the truth is that in itself is dangerous. So even though I take the action at some point in time because I'm determined to do it, sometimes an opportunity may pass because you decided to procrastinate,
Hmm.
or because you're indecisive. And so we're not expecting you to be perfect and to, always tackle things head on all the time. We're human. But it's important to realize that even though you decide to take action, when you take action, is
Hmm.
also important. And it can be the difference between, like I said before, success and regret. And I want to say that regret is not something that, kind of overturns your entire life. So you can regret
Hmm.
things and then you can move on and you can have a wonderful life. But there are things that for me, I don't want to look back and be like, because I was too slow on this opportunity and I was
Mm-hmm.
faithful, you know. So yeah.
No, I'm with you. I want to give you another strategy which could be useful for procrastination. It's just a strategy for fear in general, but it came to me as we're talking about procrastination. One of the main things that I work with my clients to use to combat fear is their vision. So
Mm-hmm.
use your vision to trump fear. Because what fear wants you to do is to stop taking action. And you need a vision that is so compelling and so delicious that you have no choice but to take action. So when you're thinking about, oh, should I stop? Are you going to procrastinate? You need something to pull you towards your goals. And that's your vision. So I always say that your vision can trump fear anytime. Once you have a vision that is very clear and that is compelling and it drives you to action. So I say, like, if you feel as if you want to stop or you're too scared, think about your vision. Think about your big why. That's the why that can motivate you to push through and continue towards your goals.
Mm-hmm. All right, and that was another gem. And speaking of gems, Keisha said, "Yes, please. I've postponed bedtime just to hear them," meaning your gems, and I'm surely getting them. And there's the cartwheel emoji. So she's really excited.
Thank you,
Nice,
Kate.
Keisha. All right. So let's talk about. So we've been talking a lot about personal fair. Uh, let's talk about fair. I mean, well, I guess at the end of the day, it's still personal, but even within an organizational context, um,
Mm,
organizations can sometimes contribute to that fear that we feel, whether it be a system of divide and rule or just general toxicity, uncertainty as it relates to your job or even the future of the company. What are some of the things that organizations can do to help persons to manage fear?
that's a great question. As you said, it can start with the culture. So I'd say like a top-down culture where it's um, okay to experiment. It's okay to do new things. It's okay to take risks. It's okay to go outside the box. So I said top-down culture, open communication. So being very clear and also having clear expectations as well. um, and also looking at the professional development of the employees. So we're talking about organizations, but organizations are made up of people, and people have fears. So as you said, we're talking about individuals, but individuals are still, in organizations. So things such as professional development to teach individuals how to overcome their fears, that makes a huge difference, and it creates a culture of learning and development as well. When I've gone into organizations, I've seen things such as, particularly in middle management and leadership, fears coming up, such as fear of criticism, fear of judgment, fear of making the wrong move, for example. So fear is definitely prevalent. And what happens is, particularly the more senior you get, no one wants to talk about it. So everyone puts on a facade as if they're the most confident, courageous person in the world, but then their actions suggest otherwise, or their lack of action suggests otherwise. So I say it starts from the top and filters down through the organization. And I'd say also remember that the organization is made up of people, and they're people first.
Mm-hmm. What's really interesting again about what you said is the fear of making mistakes. And I
Mm-hmm.
think many organizations really don't realize that creating a culture where mistakes are understood as a part of doing business. Now, I'm not telling
Mm-hmm.
you to lose like millions and millions of dollars.
Multi-billion. Mm-hmm.
Like I always say, don't go and tell anybody that Ron said that. But you know, when persons are encouraged to make mistakes, then that actually creates a very innovative culture. And
Exactly.
so
Mm-hmm.
organizations need to realize that the more fear that they instill in their employees, the less opportunity the organization has for innovation and to really grow.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you think about the feelings of instability, or fear of criticism. Those kind of things cause higher levels of turnover, for example,
Mm-hmm.
absenteeism, anxiety, definitely, depression, which again causes turnover, absenteeism. Um, and so those also have a negative impact on the workplace. So it's very important for organizations to create a culture um, that, like you said, helps persons to be able to educate people on how to better manage fear, but also um, an organization that has a culture where there's open communication, transparency,
Mm-hmm.
all the different things that you said, which, you know, pretty much creates a healthy environment for employees to thrive and what's not.
Hmm. And also, when you think about it, overcoming fear or fearing less within organizations, it impacts things such as decision making, it impacts performance, it impacts, as he says, innovation, it impacts productivity. So there's definitely a huge benefit to combating fear within organizations.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, it has to come from the top down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. I have another question. So we've moved from, you know, individual fairs to fairs within the organization. Let's talk about um, society. Now,
Mm.
there are a lot of persons who, I guess, I mean, people are becoming more and more fearful about leaving home late at night, going out. Some people are like, you know, I'm afraid of outside. I'm staying home because of things like increasing crime, for example. What do you think? What do you think that we as a society, or maybe even um, government or leaders in general, can do to help us to combat or to manage fear?
Mm. That's an interesting question because there's so many different types of fear. So when you're
Yeah.
saying to combat or to manage fear,
Mhm.
you talked about like safety essentially when you're talking about like, driving at night and going out and what's not.
Mhm.
I think it depends on what the fear actually is so that
Mhm.
you can get a little bit more specific with how to actually combat it, to be fair.
Mhm. All right. So, say for example, insecurity as it relates to the economy.
Oh, right. What
Sorry.
is sorry. If there's an insecurity as it relates to the economy, what's the question?
No, I guess for me, I'm thinking, okay, and you know, maybe I'm taking this too far, but I guess I think about things like mental health, um,
Okay.
and how, you know, like during COVID and what's not, people were really impacted by um, losing their jobs, fear of not being able to support their family, of not being able to
Hmm.
survive, and I guess I think my mind went to things like how can leaders in general manage things like um, communication, assisting with, you know, mental health initiatives, and that kind of thing to help people to manage fear.
Mm. I say like if you think about like the government essentially as similar to an organization, I say the
Mhm.
same things would apply in terms of it starting from top down and what's communicated
Yeah.
from government. But also
Mhm.
things like we talked about open communication and having clear expectations, that would still apply for governments as well.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
So
I
I think if
agree.
you almost like view it as one big organization.
Listen,
Mm.
yeah, okay,
Hmm.
makes sense. All right. And I have a friend here who's saying, "Hi, Sophie. I get fearful watching the news. I know, and all the murders.
Mm.
But yeah, um, I guess, like you said, it is, you know, fear cannot be looked at as, you know, it's very complex, and it has different facets. So yeah, you know, my mind just kind of wandered to that um, just now. So sorry for taking us off track.
No, it's okay. But what you brought up with mental health as well is extremely valid.
Yeah.
Extremely. especially as we talked about things as it came up with, was it Darjan, about anxiety, for example.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely valid as well.
Yeah. Hmm. All right. Well, I mean, is there anything that you want to say in closing about fear? Is there one big takeaway that you would want to share with us?
I think a big takeaway is one of the fears to consider. Let's say you have fear of failure, fear of success, or fear of whatever it is I like to consider the fear of nothing changing. So I like to pit that against the fear of nothing changing. And if it's something that you really want for yourself, so you're in a situation that is unfavorable, for example, then having that fear of nothing changing, that can actually be a motivator. I would rather face the fear of failure than face the fear of continuing on as I am. So that's something I didn't bring up before that I just wanted to raise as well. The fear of nothing actually changing, you just continue on as you are.
I love that.
Mm,
That's pretty deep. Yeah.
mm,
Very thought provoking. And you shared a little bit about your work earlier. Um, is there anything else that you want to share? How people can reach you? Who your target is? Do you do one-on-ones, groups, companies?
mm-hmm. Sure. So the easiest way to reach me is on LinkedIn. I believe my name is up on the screen, isn't it, Ron?
I'll put it up.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Trainer, coach, speaker. Thank you so much. And in terms of what I have coming up, so I haven't actually announced this anywhere as yet, even on my LinkedIn. I was
Breaking
planning
news,
to,
breaking news.
planning to on Monday. Is I'm running a group program specifically for professional women
Mhm.
in February, and it's professional women who know that they want more out of their lives. So whether it's more joy, more fulfillment, more ease, more success, more alignment, more balance, whatever the more is, I help you to get the confidence and the courage to go make that a reality so that you can stop being ruled by fear and self-doubt, so that you can realize your full potential, and so that you can experience an overflow of pride, joy, and fulfillment. So that's what I have coming up. And you can message me on LinkedIn to find out a little bit more about it. And it's a super intimate program. I'm only taking 10 women through it. It's a 6-week program. And at the end of it, you can expect to see a drastic change to how you perceive yourself and how confident and courageous you feel.
Mhm. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Makeda. It was an
Thank you for
absolute
having me.
it was an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. I know you're a very busy woman, and you're also, I really admire you and the work that you do. So I'm actually honored that you would come onto my platform again to share with us. And I know that persons, I mean, just from the comments and the interest, that persons were really looking forward to hearing what you had to share. And so I hope that what Makeda has shared with us today will, not only resonate with us in the moment, but actually will, propel us through the year. For those of you who are watching this, whether it's on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, this stays on those platforms. So it's not something that's going to disappear. If you need to come back and look at it, you can hear some more of the information, kind of, renew, regenerate. So if you're going to ruminate on anything, let's ruminate on this. And um, also, I asked Makeda to share some of those questions that you need to ask about FAIR, some of those curiosities about FAIR, and I will get those from her, and I will share those on my page so that you also have an opportunity to go back and to watch them, and even maybe screenshot them, and if you
Mhm.
need to post them somewhere, if you're like me, post them in your room or save them in your phone so you can look back at it whenever you want. But we want to do something different this year. We do not want to be limited by fear. We want to recognize that it is going to be there and we are going to just, you know, put it in the back seat and just keep moving.
Mhm.
So thanks so much. Misha says, this was an excellent session. Thanks for bringing us in contact with Makeda. Keep up the good work, Rowan. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Misha.
And please, feel free to connect with Makeda. She posts amazing content, very encouraging. And so please make sure that you connect with her on LinkedIn as well. Thank you very much, everybody. I look forward to speaking with you next month as we share more contemporary business topics with Noble Company. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.